Hello, here's a short video about graph theory. And we'll start with basic terminology. A graph is a collection of vertexes. I'm drawing 3 of them here, labeling them A, B, and C. And then those vertexes are joined by edges. Those edges have direction, which is indicated by the arrowhead. And this whole thing together is called a graph. These edges just represent connections between the vertexes, which you can think of as indicating whether you can travel from one vertex to another. So between A and B, I can travel in both directions, but from B to C, I can only travel from B to C. I cannot travel from C back to B. So A is called a vertex, and the plural of vertex is actually vertices. So I have 3 vertices here, A, B, and C. And each of these lines is called an edge. I have 2 edges on this graph. So we've covered our first 3 terms, vertex, edge, and direction. The whole diagram together is called a graph. So a graph is made up of edges and vertexes, or vertices, and edges have a direction. Now, this particular type of graph is called a directed graph, as opposed to an undirected graph, which is just a graph whose edges do not have arrowheads on them. In ACSL, you're only going to be working with directed graphs. So now that you're familiar with the terminology, let's look at the first type of problem that you would need to be able to solve. And that is, given a list of vertices and edges, you'd need to draw the graph. Now, typically, you'd start by drawing the vertices, all of the vertices that are given. Typically, you'd start with the alphabetically first vertex at the top of your diagram, and then arrange the remaining vertices in alphabetical order, drawn clockwise. After you've placed all your vertices on the page, then you start connecting those with edges, the edges that are listed, that are provided to you. Now, the sequence in which these letters are arranged in our edge definitions here is important. So on this first edge, you'll see it's listed as AB. That means you should draw an edge from A to B, a directed edge from A to B. So it's always from the first letter, a directed edge from the first letter to the second letter. Notice now that our second edge that's listed is called BA. So that means we need to allow for travel from B to A. Since we already have an edge drawn here, the edge line, we'll just add an arrowhead to the other end. And we'll just continue to go through this list of edges and draw them in, either adding a line with an arrowhead or simply adding an arrowhead to an existing line. And you'll notice we come to this one interesting edge that's called EE. So that means the vertex E is connected to itself with an edge, and we draw that with a simple loop arrow from E back to itself. Then we'll draw in the remaining 2 edges. And there we go. That's it. We've taken a set of vertices and edges and visualized them as a graph diagram.